In your own hometown, you were snatched out of your bed at night, kidnapped, and awoke surrounded by large walls, smooth as glass, endless corridors with no apparent escape. And it slowly dawns on you that you're not alone. Can you preserve the honor of humanity and escape from the Mindmaster? A throwback to old alien horror for the VCS's Supercharger, a 1982 cassette player adapter as opposed to a tape reader add-on. And this long adapter would bump up the RAM from 128 bytes to over 6,000, allowing that much more overhead when making games. Games that range from the Galaxian clone
Those commie mutants from space,
where the ruler of the planet Ruski has unleashed the mother creature, whose radioactive vodka mutates kidnapped victims into bloodthirsty monsters to fight through. The Defender-like killer satellites, where the decades of junk satellites orbiting the Earth suddenly activate and launch an all-out attack on the planet. Or the asteroid suicide mission, where you're shrunken down to board a microscopic submarine injected into the bloodstream to desperately stall a mysterious virus. But then there's Escape from the Mindmaster, a first-person pursuer horror where you search for mini-games while exploring a 6-story building as one of different inhuman stalkers also walks the halls looking for you. Difficulty customization allows you to choose whether you start with 9 or 5 lives, as well as the speed at which these eerie pursuers move. A pursuer shouldn't follow you between floors, but there are different pursuers to encounter across the 6 floors, which are referred to as mazes. Though outside of the final floor being a gauntlet of small connected cells, you might find their layouts are not all that maze-like. Crazy to think this game was initially teased under the title Labyrinth. I'd actually most compare the layout of the building to the Shinra headquarters in Final Fantasy VII, where there's a lot of corridors between rooms, but I wouldn't exactly call it a maze. Though there's doors that disappear behind you as you enter them, Nightmare on Elm Street style. The idea of this game is that the Mindmaster has kidnapped you to see how humans survive and think in a microcosm. The first minigame you can find as you pilot a ship dodging oncoming danger with room for error, testing your basic agility. The second as you test your reflexes via how rapidly you can match flashing arrows. The third tests your memory with the game of Simon. The fourth your dexterity via a variation of the first game where you're out in one hit, possibly changing your approach. And finally it all comes together with the final test being a game of Lunar Lander. All the while that you're searching for these games, there are also shaped crests defined and placed in corresponding indentations, all adding up to your ranking at the end of the game, prompting a judgment on the ability of humans by the mysterious Mindmaster. Now the Supercharger was short-lived, but even as they were packing their bags and going under, there were 2 new games not in stores that you could buy from Starpath directly. They didn't even have boxes for them. The first is Sword of Saros, a this time top-down pursuer maze game, though this time I'd actually call them mazes. Within these mazes are doors to rooms with monsters, keys, and loot about, but no way to fight back, fleshing out a novel concept that puts more focus on your ability to dodge the horrors pursuing you. The other game was Survival Island, where a sudden storm wrecks your ship in the South Pacific. You find yourself in shark-infested waters, struggling to make it to the island that looms in the distance. You're not just avoiding the various creatures knocking you off your boat and possibly ending you, but trying to fill a boat with food and water from your shipwreck, as this is a game of careful preparation and exploration. You have 2 movement options, either walking normally, or using a hiking staff to test everything in front of you. You know, poking something with the stick is something you do so often when navigating a foreign land, and yet, I never realized until finding this game how devoid games are of the natural human intuition to touch something with another object before touching it directly. The game encourages you to map out the island as you explore and continue to prepare. You can drink your water and keep the bottles to refill if you find more, but not all water is safe to drink. Likewise, there's edible mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, herbs, a compass to find. But you should also watch out for wildlife and traps, as this island is not uninhabited. There are others about, guarding the ruins of a lost civilization that you're gathering supplies to venture into and explore. And this game's use of gray and black for its first-person exploration is much more foreboding to me than the saturated office-colored walls of Escape from the Mindmaster, though that can have a liminal effect in itself. While Survival Island's ruins are dark. You don't find a flashlight, you find a lantern keeping visibility close to you as you walk into the darkness, still wary of traps. The light of mysterious technology illuminating in the darkness. But alongside multiple points of no return or invisible transports that you won't know are there until walking into them. What a mess. This is definitely one of those games for people who like mapping out interior locations, which is a demographic I don't see catered to as much these days. I usually just memorize layouts in my head as I explore, but with the teleporters? No thank you. At least the game has a password system, and like Escape from the Mindmaster will grade you. Of all the games for the Supercharger, Dragon Stomper is the only one I ever still hear people talk about today. Escape from the Mindmaster and Survival Island tend to blend into a sea of first-person corridor explorers from the time, but despite its advertising, Escape from the Mindmaster's relatively unmaze-like level design with obstacles, and the general presentation and focus on navigating dangers to prepare for an expedition in Survival Island make them stand out to me from all the monster maze games of the era, though I'll always have a sweet spot for Phantom Slayer simply being one with a gun. As time moved on, Supercharger tapes were becoming increasingly rare relics of video game history. So in 1994, a group online would finally get together with the goal of preserving the Supercharger's library before it's lost to time. Now, if they didn't want their efforts to be immediately taken down, of course it's illegal to distribute even no longer sold copyrighted games over the internet. Businesses will be cautious of even games they're not currently focused on selling being devalued into shareware, as you never know when you'll find a new way to package those fruits of your old labor.
Consumerism wins the day again.
So they would have to not only find donors online to assemble the increasingly rare library, but get a thumbs up from both Bridgestone, who ended up with the rights 10 years after Starpath's 1984 bankruptcy, and Atari, who still legally had exclusive usage rights. They would contact Carol Shaw of River Raid fame, whose success in the industry allowed her to retire in her 30s, to hit Atari with a little blast from the past.
Polo by Ralph Lauren.
When Warner bought Atari, they wanted a Polo game as a showcase for a store in New York. This game made by Shaw was never actually released, adding a charming pull from a veteran to their showcase, getting permission for both the Starpath library, and even to throw in the Polo game as an extra piece of video game history. As they learned of the legal situation, they would decide on a non-profit CD. As you would normally plug a tape player into the Supercharger, now you could plug your CD player with the entire library on a single disc, appropriately titling it Stella Gets a New Brain after the VCS's codename Stella. Through the efforts of all involved, the Supercharger's library was not lost to time, remaining very accessible to this day. I'm Mukhtar.